environment that the world of law enforcement has been in for the last couple of years of, yeah, there's a lot of ugliness out there. And if we can sit there and say, hey, we don't always get it right, but as long as we're faithful in always, then, because at the end of the day, it's not about what you think about me or somebody else thinks about me or anything like that. It's about what the good Lord thinks about me.
Welcome back, viewers, watchers, listeners. I'm your host, Tyler Owen. Got a guest host today that's been here several times, and it's already been pointed out that our other guest today has never been on. This is his first time on. We got our legislative team, the liaisons, the crew, John Wilkerson and Bryan Flatt, with two T's.
Two T's.
Common spelling. Welcome on, guys.
Two T's. Hey, thanks for having us,
Good
man.
to be here.
Yeah, you guys took some time away from the Capitol, and I'm sure sitting down for just a couple of hours is probably well-deserved and very much appreciated, since you guys are always constantly busting your ass there in the Capitol halls.
Yeah, during session, but keep in mind, there's still a lot of work that's done outside of session.
Yep.
You have interim hearings. We were there last week testifying on less lethal bill.
Yep.
Obviously a big issue, and we got to get some good legislation going on that next session. So we were there. Members reach out to us with problems on implementation of bills. We'll talk about some of that today during the show. But even though we're not down at the building, walking around, we're still pretty busy.
Still out and about. You're still out and
still
about.
pretty active, yeah.
Well, for those that do know or have any involvement with our ledge team, we have had some changes. We added with Bryan Flatt, being a new addition to the team, and anyone that knows Bryan and J-Dub, these guys typically or have been tied at the hip for some time and just had become really good friends, at least since I've known you guys. And so for you guys to be paired up in a team now at the Capitol, I'm super excited about it. It's just going to be an asset to us. Not saying that Bryan's an ass, because I wanted to point that out. That was said at the beginning, but he is going to be a huge asset to us out there at the Capitol.
Words matter.
Words matter. Man, for those that don't know Bryan, let's talk about you real quick. Talk about intro, talk about your career, talk about how long you've been with Tmpa, where you came from with the training division and so forth. And then we'll kind of segue into not our legislative agenda, because that's not really been set forth with as far as the guidance from the board. But we do have some key points that we know definitively that we are going to try to address at that Capitol building. So, Bryan, where are you from, man? Tell us about you.
So born and raised in Amarillo, Texas, so all the way up in the Panhandle. So
God's
about
country.
That's right.
What's up?
Pretty much in the middle of the Bible Belt. Did 24 years worth and retired 10 years ago. So I've been with Tmpa for 10 years. Started out working at Potter County Sheriff's Office in the jail.
Started off in the jail.
So
many members start off in the jail, or explorers, but a lot of the jail time.
Yeah, and over the years, at the time it was, man, this is because when they hired me, or I was going through my interview board, and they had told me back then, I don't know if it's still that way now, under our old sheriff, God rest his soul, you had to do a minimum of 2 years in the jail before you're even eligible to test for deputy. And then even if there was going to be an opening, doesn't mean you're going to get it.
Yeah.
Because they were like, hey, we have people that have been working in the jail for 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, and all that. And I told them initially, I go, I'll give you 3 years. And if I haven't made deputy in 3 years, I'm probably on to greener pastures, And they were like, what the heck? And I got fortunate, got out in 2.5. And even though it seemed like it took forever to get out, look back on it now, it was just, blink of an eye.
I'm going to say this or ask this question, and I mean this lovingly. Some people that I grew up with, grew up in a very structured, innocent type home. What I mean by that is when they're 18 years old, they don't have a lot of street knowledge and kind of how the streets really work. And so, I was one of those kids that I was completely naive of really the darkness that really was within my community that I grew up in. And so when I went to the jail, it was a great experience, because it opened my eyes to things that the world is really dangerous, and there's some dangerous people out there that are locked up for the most part. Did you grow up like that, and then being exposed to the jail, was it kind of that transition, or did you kind of have that life experience?
Yeah, I was brought up in a Christian home. We were at church on Sunday morning, Sunday night, and on Wednesdays. And whenever I got into law enforcement, it was just a happen chance kind of a thing. I had no desire growing up to be a cop, never even thought about it. It just kind of happened. And yeah, you truly got to see the kind of the real world,
Yeah.
right? And even though I wouldn't trade the 2.5 years for anything, because it was a great experience going to the street. During the first 2 months when I almost got killed in the jail, I would trade that any day. But after that, then it was all about truly knowing how evil the world could be. And so, like, I know a lot of people that are like, man, I absolutely hated working in the jail. It's like, sometimes you do your time, and no pun intended, and especially because most of the people will say, hey, that's where I really learned to communicate. And I had supervisors a couple that actually came out and said, if you can learn to communicate in here, that will help you so greatly out on the street. And one of the most poignant things that was ever told to me was, they are letting you keep them under control in here, right? And so, you'd go in. And so it was a great experience. And so did about 24 years worth up in the Panhandle, then, in the middle of the Bible Belt. And then I moved down to the greater Austin area and came to work for Tmpa as a full-time instructor. And I was a full-time instructor for 1.5 years. Then I took over as training coordinator for the next almost 8.5 years. And then moved over to legislative affairs.
And as Sariga says, we've been scheming together ever since.
Yeah. I don't think he's really grasped that yet.
No. I do want to touch, knowing you for I guess I'm going on 7 years now at Tmpa, you've always maintained, I don't think you're officially called Tmpa's chaplain. I don't think that title's ever been given to you, but if you've ever attended our conference, you are now the Texas FOP chaplain.
Yeah, I've been Texas FOP chaplain now for, I guess, 4 years. And I'm also on the national FOP, the chaplain advisory committee for that as well.
One of the things I've always loved and admired about you is that I'm just going to call it what it is. This may come out extremely blunt, but there are people in our profession that are extremist when it comes to their religion, and then you have realists that know and understand. I grew up in a very church environment, and it was challenging for me because some other situations with a pastor, and so it steered me away from the church. But that's my own, and I believe in God, and I'm a Christian. One of the things I love about you is that you're very balanced, and one of the things that I did not do a good job when I was on patrol is being a Christian. You have some opportunities really in the streets. I mean, you talk about people being dangerous and so forth. Touch on or talk about, did you find a struggle, or was it challenging for you to be such a outspoken Christian and such kind of a chaplain oriented type guy? Did you find it hard working the streets and trying to find a balance of being a cop and then being a Christian as far as spreading the word of Jesus? Was it hard?
So especially early on, I was 22 years old when I hit the streets. And even though I was brought up in a Christian family and went to church and all that, I had my time of rebellion, and I don't think it was very early on that I ever had an opportunity to share my faith, because I'm a sinner just like everybody else. And so I'd have good days and bad days. And I just never really shied away from it. It was kind of one of those things of if there's an opportunity to help somebody, because there's a lot of, besides all the ugliness that's out there, there's a lot of people that are in need of help. And when you get somebody that's truly broken out there and they just have nowhere else to go, and that's at the time that you're like, this is all I have to offer you. I can't offer you money. I can't offer you a place to stay. This is what I can, give to you and share with them any type of experience or knowledge that I have about my faith. And 99.9% of the time, people were absolutely responsive to that. I gave away several devotion books that I had, and it was just one of those things of you're figuratively tapped on the shoulder, and it's like, today's the day you give that away. And one of my favorite books at the time, and gave to we've been in the business for a long time, absolute meth addict, female that still lived at home with her family. They still allowed her to live there, even though she stole pretty much everything from them. And you just do that. And so we're, especially in the environment that the world of law enforcement has been in for the last couple of years, there's a lot of ugliness out there. And if we can sit there and say, hey, we don't always get it right, but as long as we're faithful in always, then, because at the end of the day, it's not about what you think about me or somebody else thinks about me or anything like that. It's about what the good Lord thinks about me at the end of the day. And daily you have to wake up. Whenever I walk outside, one of the first things I do is look up somewhere into the sky, because we have no idea where he is, and say, good morning, Lord.
Yeah.
Right. And it might be 10 minutes later driving on the way to the office, into close to downtown Austin. And that's when your faith is tested. And it's how you deal with that. Just like whenever we're going to go work at the Capitol, I've told JW, it's politics and people don't always agree and they don't always like law enforcement. The day that session starts, every day that I walk in, I'm going to say a prayer. I'm going to put a hand on the building. And after that, it's not up to me.
Wow.
So
that's pretty amazing. And anyway, but from me to you, I've always appreciated you maintaining that, somebody that we can look up to and say, as far as the faith is concerned, you do a really good job of balancing.
Appreciate
that.
it.
So,
I just want to point out, on my drive in this morning, I was tested multiple times on the 183. I just want to make that clear.
It's Austin traffic. What do you?
I was about 20 minutes behind you, so I understand.
Yeah. Well, speaking of the Capitol, again, your background speaks for itself. Coming from being a cop, walking the hallways, you have a so much better understanding and better perspective of what needs to be passed and what bills we need to identify. And I say we as an organization, or a collaborative effort with other organizations that we do work with, that we need bills that we need to kill. And so having that experience, just as such as you do, and adding you to the team is, like I said, it's a bonus. So, but transitioning to the Capitol, we got the session coming up next year, and like I said before, we haven't had the, I guess, guidelines given to us or y'all by the board of like these are the priorities, but we do have some understanding of what bills are going to be important.
Yeah. So to clarify on that, as the year progresses, there's issues that come up, and we'll take it to the board and internally after we discuss it, if we're like, this is pretty major issue. And so there are a few things that the board has already said, yes, we're going to make that a priority for us, but not a full blown list of these are all of our priorities.
Well, give an example of something that you think that an internal discussion is going to be had, and then we as an association are going to take the approach of, this is where we stand, this is what we're going to do, now go forth and conquer.
So a great one would be probably like the drone issues that were brought to us. I think it was you that got me involved with the drone conference deal. So drones are a vital part of law enforcement. They help save lives. They help catch bad guys. They keep our members out of harm's way when they're utilized. So even though we don't know exactly what needs to happen with that bill, we do know that it's going to be a major hot button topic for us, like it was last session, right? If you remember last session, so down at the Capitol, there's this thing called a vendor bill, right? And that's where somebody goes in and they'll file a bill that says something along the lines of, if you're a state agency or a government agency, you have to purchase, and it can only be within these parameters, right? And when you look at what's in those parameters, it's typically only one or two companies that offer within those parameters. And so what they do is they try to write a vendor bill that carves everybody else out, forces everybody to buy their product, right? That's what we saw last session. And then with that came some changes out of the Fifth Circuit on a pending lawsuit or pending case, got remanded or reversed back down. Some sanctions lifted off and all that kind of good stuff. And so that's opened up this whole new spectrum of when can law enforcement use a drone and what are the privacy issues associated with it, right? So obviously we're going to have to pay some attention to that. Our board has already said, yes, we can work with the Drone Association, figure out what legislative changes need to be made and work on trying to get those made. So that's just one example.
Yeah. Well, speaking of the drone, I think the most iconic drone, I guess, situation that was referred to during session, was it not the Dallas 5 incident? Was that not referred to during that, where it was and that wasn't a drone, it was a robot.
So that was actually a couple sessions ago.
Right.
That I'm trying to remember the legislator's name, filed a bill that would have prohibited us from using. I'm not going to say drones.
It was something like unmanned.
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 And that came out of, I think it came out of the Dallas situation, right? And I think what happens is you have these special situations like that happen right there. I think that Chief Brown, when he made that call to strap R2D2 with some explosives and send him on in there, I think great idea, right? But you know, in the building, there can be some of those that think, oh man, law enforcement did this, and then it's like they go from this extraordinary situation to now they can envision predator drones flying over, you know, dropping nukes and all that kind of stuff, right? So kind of a knee-jerk reaction that happened, and we were able to get that fended off, and I think that at the end of the day, the bill that passed out of there is needed. Yeah. The language on it's needed. You know, if you're going to do something, if you're going to use force with you know, with something like that, then there needs to be protocols put into place.
I wish there would have been an exception to everybody being quote unquote licensed to operate the drone. I'm just throwing it out there because that course is extremely
I heard that course is pretty hard. I mean, I haven't taken it, but I know somebody that did, and
let's just say I didn't get my wings.
Oh, that was you.
Yeah,
I'm sorry, I forgot.
I expected Top Gun, and me and Maverick were going to be flying around, and just didn't work out. But yeah, so that's there's nothing on here for is there drone lane changes coming up expected for this next session?
So during the committee hearing that was had last week, and man, so it's funny, you can sit in those committee hearings and you can kind of pick and see what's coming out, right? Yeah. And on one of the interim charges, it had to do with interoperability with communications, like 911 communication, again, you know, amongst law enforcement agencies, everything else. And I thought it was pretty ironic that there were 2 or 3 companies at that table that sold drones, and so just makes me think that there's going to be something in the pipes with interoperability and that kind of stuff. Again, the way I read into what they were saying was they're probably looking for a way to get a vendor bill filed.
Yeah. Well, speaking of other interest groups and how politics plays in those, one other major problem we see at the Capitol that we're trying to address year after year, session after session, is workers' comp.
Oh, yes.
You put a significant amount of time into it last year, way more than I think anybody else would have as far as showing the dedication. We got there, but we didn't finish the line, and it was not anything due to your, at least, dedication or effort. So talk about workers' comp, what we're expecting to happen this session, and how we're trying to fix the issues.
Yeah, so there's a couple different mindsets and mentalities on it, depending on which office you talk to, right? So some say, you know what, since it's so complicated and everything, then we need to break it all out. We need to have first responders with their own comp system and then everybody else with theirs. And then you have the insurance company saying, well, that may not be constitutional because now you're passing a law that only affects one class of individual, et cetera, et cetera. So there's all that to be worked out, but let's quit overcomplicating it. The bills, House Bill 790 last session, that bill is very simplistic.
Filed by our friend.
Yep, filed by Representative Jared Patterson. Yep. Very, very good to us. Senator Mays Middleton picked it up on the Senate side. Without going into too much detail, it got murdered in the Senate. To all of our viewers, listeners,
watchers,
voyeurs, all those folks, it is imperative that you donate to PAC. Because what got that bill killed in the Senate, I firmly believe what got that bill killed is the insurance companies killed it. But 790 is real simple. The philosophy is real simple. And I don't know why these insurance companies, well, I know why. It cuts into their profit margin. Yep. But it's real simple. Tyler Owen works on the streets. Tyler Owen gets hurt. Tyler Owen files that workers' comp deal, right? And it gets denied. Fine. You take that denial letter. If you're also on your wife's insurance, now you go on that insurance and you get fixed and you get back to work. If your local association has to sell cookies to get you the surgery that you need, then that happens. Whatever it takes to get Tyler Owen fixed and back to work as quick as possible, that bill would have allowed that to happen. And then after you're back to work, you go through the appeal process. And if you prevail, the insurance carrier, all they do is they reimburse the money that you're out.
That sounds simple to me.
Sounds real simple.
Now, this is meant to, let me just ask this question. If I am suffering from a mental, I've been involved in a shooting, I've seen a pretty traumatic, which is a daily occurrence in law enforcement, that not shootings, but as far as you seeing some traumatic event and I'm having some PTSD or I'm having some kind of mental situation. Has that portion of workman's comp been addressed?
So this will help with that as well. And so the PTSD portion of workers' comp, here's the big issue with that. For one, you don't have very many doctors out there that specialize in PTSD, right?
Right.
And then out of the ones that you do have, none of them want to deal with workers' comp because it's a nightmare to deal with workers' comp, right? It's, you're having to file 10 times as much paperwork, and your reimbursement from them is less than what it is with Medicare. So you're having to do more work and you're getting paid less. And so when you find a mental health professional that's willing to take a comp case, you better put them on your Christmas card list because they're good-hearted people that are seriously just trying to help law enforcement or public safety. So again, kind of getting back to if comp's going to deny, and comp denies, it's a war of attrition is what it is. So when they deny and they take you down that war of attrition and they just want you to give up, it's really easy to do on the mental health spectrum side of it. I've talked to a lot of members, and where you run into your real big issues is like, say, the city of Austin, who's self-insured with a third-party administrator. I've talked to several that public safety folks that tried to get help with mental health, but because of the city of Austin's workers' comp, self-insurance, and their third-party carrier, nobody wants to work with that system. So a lot of problems with it. We have to take it one step at a time, take small bites out of the apple to eventually get it where we need to be.
Do you think that the original 790 bill that passed the House last time, what manipulation or rewording do you think should or could happen to get it past the finish line through the Senate this time, or if any?
I don't think any needs to happen. I think we're definitely going to have to re-strategize on how to get it through the Senate.
Yeah.
I don't doubt for one bit we'll get it to the House again.
Yeah.
It passed unanimously out of the House last session. So all 148 state reps that were present that day voted in support of that bill, and none of them went back and changed their vote afterwards. Everybody understood and recognized that this is a very important piece of legislation for Tmpa and for the public safety as a whole. So
last session was so interesting too, though, because I think there was a big storm brewing at the Capitol, and it at least it seemed like to me, just the average Texan citizen that had law enforcement experience, was anything that did pass out of the House unanimously was almost targeted or going to be targeted when it went to the Senate, just because of the situation brewing and kind of ongoing. At least it looked that way to me.
Yeah, and it was frustrating for us. Let me tell you, it was very frustrating because, you've got all these different political fronts down there, right? You've got this chairman of this committee wants to get his bill through, so he's going to hold up a bill from this representative, but then somebody else injects because they want their bill to come through. And so you got all these different pulling parts, and then everybody's blaming each other, which is why you started. And it got comical sometimes. It was frustrating for the most part, but it was comical at other times because you'd see state reps walk up to the back mic. They'd get a bill from the Senate, so they'd work out a deal, and you saw this on both sides. You would see where, they'd say, okay, look, I'll carry your bill here, you carry my bill there. Well, then they felt like the other side, whether it's House or Senate, they felt like the other side wasn't moving it fast enough or moving it far enough or moving at the speed that they wanted. And so it was almost like this, this show off. It's like, okay, Tyler, I've got your bill. You need to get my bill heard. You need to get it moving. And then all of a sudden you'd go off and you'd work my side of the House or my side of the Senate, and you'd get that bill put up. Well, it's still up to me to push that bill. Yeah. So what do? I take the back mic and I just postpone the bill until, say, September 26, 2035.
Wow. Yeah, that's just, it's politics, though.
Yep.
I mean, and that's something that it's very interesting for those that during session you can follow every single committee, follow bills, and we do a decent job. I'll say this. On the communication side of things, we can't show our cards too much because there's strategies behind it. And so some members have said in the past, man, I really want to know about this bill and this bill. You can call us and we can talk to you. We just are very careful on what we put out there, when we put it out there, for strategy reasons on the legislative side.
Right.
So anyway, it's just a complex
And
situation.
things change so quickly down there.
They do. They do.
You know, a great example of things changing quickly, the Kobe Bryant bill, right? Don't photograph dead bodies and that kind of stuff, share it, right? Yep. So the senator that filed that bill, he originally had a criminal penalty associated with it. Well, obviously, it didn't have strong enough language in there that would protect, say, your homicide investigators that are doing a conference and teaching or doing a school or something like that.
A great point.
A very far-reaching district attorney, not that we have any in this area, but a district attorney that's targeting police. I could see them going after something like this, right? Yeah. Just to kind of get a dig in there. So, we approached their office and we're like, hey, we want this pulled out. And they're like, no, that's got to stay in. So I'm like, okay, so we're opposed to it. So I'm walking, the bill's coming up for a hearing. I'm walking up to the kiosk, which is an iPad, and I'm plugging in my information to register Tmpa against the bill. Right when I hit submit, I get a call from Ray Hunt from HPLU, says, hey, the senator is going to go ahead and remove that. Oh, crap. Well, can you tell him we'll change our position at a later date, but we're registered against the bill right now. So literally it changes that quick.
Wow. That's interesting. Well, speaking of, is that the invasive visual recording bill? Is that something different?
No. So a member with the South Texas ICAC, back when we were teaching a legislative update class, he brought that bill up, and basically, in our board agreed with the philosophy on that. If you're committing that act, and here's the best way he explained it: a complete stranger violates somebody else's privacy with that. That level of offense is exactly the same as if it's done to, say, a guy does that to his stepdaughter, and so
give me an example of what that bill would target.
So what it would do is it would create enhancements. So right now, I believe it's a state jail felony for invasive visual recording. We're looking
like a hidden cam.
Yeah, hidden cam, right? You're recording the intimate areas of a person, in their bathroom, in their bedroom, something like that. Well, with the changes that we're looking at is if the person that's being recorded is a minor under the age of 17, there needs to be an enhancement. And if that person looks to the person that's doing it for protection, parent figure, something like that, then there needs to be a bigger enhancement on that as well.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, again, some of the shit just makes sense. I mean,
right.
You can't say it any other way.
And the biggest thing is that came from our members, right? That those are our members that are out there doing the job day in and day out, and they're communicating these things to us. And that's part of our job. That's what Bryan and I do is we take what our members are saying, we take it down to that building, and we try to get some good changes made.
Is it too late right now, you think, for members to – well, it's never too late, but it is right now the planning phase of kind of what we've already kind of set some guidelines and what our mission is for the session. At what point's kind of a cutoff of like, man, it's kind of too late, Bryan, to reach out to me for this next session. However, moving forward for, the next session for what I guess it'd be the 90th, or is this upcoming? Is this the 90th coming up? 89th.
89th.
Okay. So the 90th, we'll go ahead and set this, guideline or recommendation. We'll try to work with bills then. When's a good cutoff for members to be calling you guys to work on these topics during the off season?
Well, I'll tell you, a cutoff is probably mid-March, and I say that loosely. And the reason why I say that's cutoff is because about mid-March, late March, that's when the cutoff is to file bills. If any of our members have an idea for
during the session,
right?
Okay.
If any of our members have ideas for legislation, bring those to us, because I'll give you a great point. Past President Joe Tovar, right? Last session, one of the things that he put on our plate that the board approved was trying to get the minimum threshold for crash reporting raised from 1,000 to 5,000. Well, let's say that was not something that was brought to us in advance, but that's something where we have members that reach out to us midstream and they go, hey, this would be really nice. Now, that is a very simplistic fix, and not all of them are simplistic. There's a lot of unintended consequences when you start changing bills, right? But on something like that, we can find another bill that's germane to the transportation code to crashes.
Big word.
Big word.
Yeah.
We can find something that's there, and we can go to that author, and we can try to get that language put in.
Right.
And that's something that we did because the bill that we had state representative, I'm trying to remember his name, that filed that. I want to say Munoz filed that one for us. No, I take that back. Fred Frazier filed that one for us. His bill didn't get any traction, but Senator Alvarado had a bill that was germane. And so we worked something out in there, but then unfortunately that bill got killed too, right? So if you have an idea, bring it to us. I would say if you have an idea and you're like, this needs to be changed right now during this next session, that's something that you need to be bringing to us months in advance. So that way we can do the legwork of getting it dissected. Give you a great example. Let's say civil service, right?
Yep.
Somebody says, you know what, there's this little section in the civil service statute that we need to get changed. Okay. There's a couple issues with that. There's several different types of civil service.
Right.
But then here's the big thing. You can open up a bill, or you get a bill filed. And when you open that statute up, it's subject to amendments being filed on it. So somebody can come to us and say, hey, there's a really great idea that I have for, say, 143 municipal civil service. I think this needs to be in there. We look at it. We're always apprehensive on those. Reason being is because you can file that. It can work its way through and everything's going beautiful. And then all of a sudden, boom, amendment drops that completely repeals 143 altogether. And if that's what passes, 143 is gone.
Yeah. Can a rep file a bill that's quote unquote closed, or you can essentially attach amendment to any bill?
So it cannot violate the two subject rule, and it has to be germane.
Okay, so dumb that down for me.
I wish I could. For
so
germane, it has to be related, right?
Okay, right.
But the two subject rule is open to interpretation. I have tried to understand that.
You've been in that building too long. That's way political answer all that one.
I have tried to understand the two subject rule, and I've seen where the parliamentarian has ruled where I'm looking at it and I'm going, oh, that clearly violates the two subject rule, and they're like, nope, it doesn't. And then others
move along.
Yeah, and then others, it's like, okay, that's the same subject. They're like, nope, this is two subject rule violation. I'm like, oh God, I don't know.
Well, and back to Joe Tovar, or past President Tovar's spirit of that bill, for our non-listeners, you may not be aware of this, but law enforcement, we're not required to work any accident. The only accident report that we are required as peace officers is to complete accident reports that involve death. The spirit behind past President Tovar, because it's a recommendation, because you may walk up to an accident and say, oh, there's clearly $1,000 worth of damage. I may walk up there. Good example is where you live at on the north side of the Austin area, and where I live at on the south side of Austin area, and where Bryan lives at on the western side, I guess. Your interpretation for what the current prices of what those body shops may go for may be spectrums apart. And so it's up for up to interpretation. There's no requirement for us to do an accident report unless there's death involved.
Now, just for clarification, the only time we have to, in law, the only time we have to do a crash report is if we investigate the crash.
I disagree. And the only reason why is because it clearly says in there that if a death occurs, that an accident report shall be completed. I've never read anything where it says shall be for us, quote unquote, investigate. I've never read that. I'm not saying it's not there.
There's no law saying that you have to investigate.
Well, that's true.
The law says if you do investigate, you have to file a report.
Right. But what is the like a time frame for investigation? Show up on the scene and say, hell no, this isn't $1,000.
Well, leave the $1,000 out of it. Right.
Right.
And so there is specific language in there that talks about what an investigation is, and it's very.
Is it vague too?
It's very vague. Yeah.
Okay.
And so I my recommendation, and then I was pulling patrol shifts during July 4th, and I bet I responded to 4 different crashes that weekend, and not once did I pull up and say, what happened? I pulled up and said, need an ambulance? Guess how many crash reports I did?
Zero. Well, that's true. Did you know this? That some of the and maybe we can talk off air, that fire departments, when they show up to a scene and there's insurance, they technically can bill for each engine arriving to that scene, which is a moneymaker, and that's a slippery slope, in my opinion, for cities. But if fire departments can do it, I don't understand why all these cities and municipalities, to include counties as well, why they can't at least bill for time and effort spent on investing. Because let's face it, The only reason, in my opinion, this is no reflection of TMPA, but in my opinion, the only reason why law enforcement completes traffic reports is for insurance purposes only, with the exception of death, because it's basically civil, in my opinion. It falls under the civil aspect of it. I don't agree with us working them, but we do, and so we're going to continue to do it. And so I think with the retention, recruitment, and financial situation that all law enforcement agencies are across, I don't think it would harm anything for us to be able to bill. The caveat to that is that those are also our the taxpayers. We work for them, and so in return, their premiums are going to shoot up, and so it's maybe a slippery slope. But I didn't know if you knew that or not.
Yeah, actually, I do. And the only reason I know that is because in order for our volunteer fire department where I live at, they had to come to the city council and get the city council to file the document and sign the agreement that would allow them to do so.
I got you. Well, it's very interesting. That whole accident report system is crazy. But speaking of counties, you said that a while ago about civil service. Let's talk about civil service in this next live session and kind of what we're expecting, what we're planning to do. We've had some recent success in Williamson County. Our field rep, David Kurlowicz, did a really good job. You guys assisted with that as well, with Williamson County getting civil service. So talk about what our next, I guess, upcoming agenda is with pertaining to civil service on counties. Yeah,
we got to strengthen it. And therein lies the problem. If you go back and you look at municipal civil service versus county civil service, right? 143 municipal civil service. When a city adopts 143, you've got pages and pages and pages of law that they have to adopt with it. And the only way that you variate off of that is if you enter into a collective bargaining agreement or a meet-confer agreement. There is some little bit of wiggle room in there for the Civil Service Commission to make some of their own rules, but generally speaking, when a city adopts municipal civil service, they adopt everything in that law. County civil service,
it's the stepchildren.
They appoint the Civil Service Commission, and the Civil Service Commission makes whatever rules they want to. So you can actually run a referendum and get the voters to approve county civil service. And at the end of the day, the County Civil Service Commission can say, man, we're going to leave everything the same.
But there's guidelines, of what counties can qualify for that.
Yes. So and that's where it gets even more confusing because you got some that's 300,000, some 250, some 500,000. You got subchapter A, County Civil Service, subchapter B, County Civil Service. But bottom line is whatever the county service system is that gets adopted, we've got to find a way to get some better protections for our members in there.
Yeah, I agree. Well, working for a county can be very complex, very challenging. Your boss is elected. I said this on last podcast, is that I don't think any elected official pertaining to law enforcement, that be the sheriff, district attorneys, judges, I don't personally think they should have any type of party affiliation because it can be just it's a challenging situation to be in. And the fact of the matter is law is black and white. It's not red and blue. And so I don't see why there's a need to have a party affiliation when it comes to elections pertaining to law enforcement or people that are involved in the criminal justice system.
I've never put any thought into that, but I tend to agree with you. I mean, mayors don't have to declare.
That's right. And so I don't understand the understanding behind it because it can change the dynamics of a sheriff's office within, seconds. I mean, it's just crazy. But anyway, general thoughts and legislative ideas. Bryan, with your training experience, we all, every cop out there that has any involvement with following the session, we always get tense, when session comes out because they're gonna add the dreaded TCOL hours to the upcoming stuff. With your past experience being a training coordinator for Tmpa and also a 20-year cop, is there something that you would like to see now that you're on the team? I mean, you're the front runner with J-Dub, Mitch Landry, and John Sariga down there. Is there something that you already had kind of an idea for moving forward to this next session of kind of like, man, this needs to happen, this is why? Or did you just kind of, be kind of the liaison between training and our ledge team? Or is there an idea that you have or no?
Gosh, I have a million ideas because, it is like you say, once session meets every 2 years and that new list comes out, as cops, we're always like, we have to sit here and take, X, Y, and Z.
And what's funny is it's always I mean this lovingly. It's always a hiccup that law enforcement has of why we've got to, do the training. The deaf. A couple of years ago, we had the impaired driver course. I mean, these are good classes for law enforcement to take. Sure. Not underrated, but the dog shooting of the dog incident.
Don't shoot Fluffy the dog.
Don't shoot Fluffy the dog. But anyway.
Yeah, it's. I mean, it's like what you say. What and you probably did when you were still working. Of our policy manuals were this thick for a reason, and in some places, exactly who that policy was in reference to.
Yep.
Right, and so we take that in Texas, and then it also hits us nationwide. That's happened over the last several years. I mean, there's things that I look at just from my history and what I was truly passionate about on the use of force and defensive tactics and tactical kind of stuff and whatnot, that it's like whenever up until knowing, like whenever JW was asking me, hey, do you want to come and work with me at the Capitol, and I was like, you got to be out of your mind.
You're crazy.
Right. And then finally it happens. I was like, it's time. And where, going all over the state, over almost 10 years worth and thousands of students coming to classes. And, you hear it, especially when you teach legislative update class and, you're trying to bring that passion to that class, and one of the first things I always asked was, how many of you followed this last legislative session?
Not one hand.
Very few that would ever raise their hand. And then I would follow it up with, okay, how many of you like politics? No hands, right? And then how many do you don't like politics? And then, most of the hands come up. And then whenever you would ask them, I go, why are we not involved with this? And I'm a victim of that as well, especially early on, of why are we not part of this? If we're going to sit there and gripe and moan and complain about it, why are we not at that table having those meetings to say, hey, because, you think in Texas there's 80,000 peace officers, 26,000 jailers. I think it's upwards of 8,000 to 10,000 telecommunicators now, dispatchers.
Wow.
Everybody has their own unique need, right? So it's like, after this last session, the incident, that happened in Uvalde and what transpired with that. And then, now the alert training for everybody. And I was hearing that, just teaching it. And it's like, okay, it's valid training, right? And we should probably do this.
Yeah.
And then whenever it comes out as, hey, here's this laundry list of classes that you can take to fulfill that mandate. And just from my background, I'm like, well, that's not really what I was looking at, but okay. Where you have all that, and yet we still have and I still get asked about this of how come we don't? And there was it was probably, I don't even know, it was many years ago. I took an email one day, and this guy had asked, he was very actively involved in jiu-jitsu for cops. And he was like, hey, what's your thoughts on making it mandatory for jiu-jitsu training for cops? Well, I was a defensive tactics guy, combatives guy, and did jiu-jitsu, a little bit. And I was like, hey, I'm absolutely on board with that. Any training you can get to help us out on the street, absolutely. Is there a chance that that's going to pass for every cop to do that? Never going to happen. Never. Because there's no requirement in TCOL where an agency has to have an annual or every other year use of force, combatives, arrest and control training, period. There's no law on that.
And it's not because they don't believe in it. It's the funding. It always comes down to
it's always the funding, the lack of
funding, the insurance premiums, people get hurt.
There's always people get hurt. We'll have quality instruction, and I mean we can get hurt walking up a set of stairs, right? It is what it is. But I mean, I have a lot of things that, like when we were at that, I was listening to and watching JW testify at that hearing last week on the less lethal. And even though I haven't been there for a session yet on this side of things, and listening to some of the members of the committee up there, some of the comments that they had to people that were up there and the questions that they ask, and you sit back there and go, and some of y'all you just don't have a clue about this. You just don't have a clue, right? And so that old adage of, hey, unless you've been in our shoes and taken that walk with us,
yep.
Right? And so it's going to be very challenging, but very rewarding. People have asked, hey, what are you looking forward to? I was like, I'm just ready for it to get started.
Yeah.
And I've tell everybody that I talk to, hey, if you have something that you want to try to push forward, contact us, like JW talked about, so we can get y'all. And I've had a couple people like, hey, I absolutely never knew that a cop could come down, and by cop I mean everybody in the field. Right. That we had the opportunity to come down and testify in a committee hearing. Like, it blew some of them away. It was like,
you know what? I just had this idea. If we can pull it off, it would be great. And we had a lot of success. You two were very much instrumental and involved with the use of force media day that we had with the what was the organization? Anyway, it was in Wilkerson County. Man, how cool would that be to invite some legislators to do a use of force training, and we may or may not invite the media depending on kind of how that would benefit us, but I think it'd be cool. I think it'd be really beneficial, honestly.
Yeah, and so with that committee hearing last week, one of the things that we're going to do is we're going to follow back up, and we're going to invite those folks out. We made some great relationships with Axon and some of those other groups, and that's part of what we do here with the legislative team is we try to get them exposed to as much as possible. And so one of the things that we're going to circle back with some of those committee members on, we're going to try to get like a range day set up where some of those members can come out and they can fire some less lethal rounds. They can pop off some tasers. Brian volunteered to get shocked.
I was waiting for that. And
I'll take a 40 millimeter if you get tased.
Oh my God, you would?
Only if I get to shoot it.
But
oh my God.
You know how we're always scheming.
True.
We could,
yeah,
true.
Hey, and the cool thing about we've got so many quality, awesome ranges thanks to some good law enforcement leadership here in the area. We've got Williamson County with Sheriff Gleason. We've got interim Chief Henderson with Austin PD and our friends over at APA. And Leander I think has got Round Rock's got a phenomenal facility. Burn it.
Yeah.
So we got some facilities that we can use. But back to your point about people who don't really follow, there was a point, thank God I've already got 2 kids, and I'll make this point in a minute, is that there was a point during the 87th session where there was a piece of legislation filed. It didn't pass. It got to the finish line almost, and minutes were counting down, and it didn't make it with the child transfer bill. And me and Janet, no shit, we were laying in bed every single night watching committee hearings, waiting for this bill to come up. And I just walked out using the restroom and saw her in bed. She's got her cell phone, watched the committee hearing. It was a different committee than I was watching. And I was like, this is the life of Tyler Owen. We're watching committee hearings at 10:30 at night. And which that's a daily occurrence for you guys, whether you're there or watching them to monitor kind of what's going on. It was just kind of interesting. But speaking of that bill, that's one thing. We've got a lot of phone calls on this.
Right before this, right before we walked in this room, I was on the phone with
the
one.
The spirit of the bill was great, and we are so appreciative of the initial filing by then State Rep Chris Patty, and then thank God that Candy Nobles picked it up. Representative Nobles carried across the finish line with the House, and then ultimately, I think Senator Hughes is the one that picked it up there in the Senate, and we got it passed.
Yeah.
But we found some. Well, we didn't. The school district seemingly found some loopholes.
Well, so, and this is a great opportunity to talk about this, and maybe I'm hopeful that we'll get some folks that'll watch this and they'll get a better understanding of it. So bottom line, what happened is when you get a bill filed, it goes to this group called Texas Ledge Council. Texas Ledge Council, a bunch of lawyers, they make sure it's constitutional, they make sure it's got the right language in it, et cetera, et cetera. Somehow a little bit of language got stuck into that bill that basically says that the transfer of that peace officer's kid is the same as a transfer under this other section. That other section is what authorizes 2 school districts to enter into an agreement for a transfer of kids. The intent of putting that in there was to kind of make it a little bit more clear cut on, kind of what the process is. But the way that the school districts interpret it and the way that the legal minds interpret it is that if there is an agreement in place, then now House Bill 1959 would compel those 2 schools to transfer the kid. But if there's not an agreement in place, then they don't have to enter into that agreement.
Right.
And so there's that little catch. There's that little loophole. Talked to Tiger Hanner, one of our really badass attorneys, and he's done a lot of work for school districts. And Tiger told me, he said a lot of school districts don't enter into agreements anyways. They kind of do this ad hoc, this kid, we're going to take this one to the board and, maybe not this one, because they're fearful if they enter into an agreement, then it'll open the floodgates for more, et cetera, et cetera. Good news about it is, talked to Representative Kenny Noble about it. She's not happy with the way that this has been handled, and she's all on board with getting it fixed. Talked to the Public Education Chairman, Brad Buckley. Great guy. He's on board with getting it fixed. We just got to wait for the session to start.
And the spirit behind the bill, what began, it was jokingly called during the 87th here internally at Tmpa, the Tyler Owen bill. But what happened was my daughter, I lived in a very small rural town in East Texas, and she ultimately became bullied because of my profession. I was part of a unit that we went out and apprehended people.
Task force.
And and so I did not typically wear that type of stuff around my kids at school. And I was running late. We had just served a warrant and basically was in school with all of my gear on. Well, if you think about the environment of that, some of the kids that she went to school with, their family members, I don't want to use the word targeted because we were just simply doing our jobs because those were violent offenders, but she became bullied about it. So when I began doing my research of trying to transfer my child out of the school district that we lived in to neighboring school districts, it was obvious to me it was impossible. Or there was a cost associated with it of upwards to around $2,000 to $3,000 for the transfer price. Doing a little bit of research, it showed that if you're an employee of the school district, of a neighboring school district, then you could bring your kids over, or if you were a military veteran. And so I called bullshit where bullshit needed to be called and just simply reached out. Me and my state rep had a great working relationship together. He was awesome. Again, Chris Patty, and just called him up and said, hey, I need your help. My kid's being bullied. How can we fix it? And then it happened. And so that's the spirit behind the bill. Again, we got legislation passed. It needs to be cleaned up just a little bit.
Yeah, and we've got the commitment from the movers and shakers down there.
Well, and what's interesting is that we got when this came out that this bill was going, and this probably happens with so many other bills that you guys do or you guys are associated with. What I didn't realize is there was a situation in North Texas where one of our members was involved with a critical incident where bad guy pulled a gun on officer. Officer unfortunately had to do his job and ended up taking the guy's life because it was a justified use of force situation. What he didn't know is that bad guy and his child, the bad guy's child and his child, the officers, they went to school with each other.
Yep.
You talk about awkward.
Yep.
And so it created problems, clearly. And so, there's been so many different stories come out of those. But what's so fascinating to me is how many bills were filed last session? Approximately 8,000. I mean, there's thousands and thousands.
I want to
of
say.
bills. I didn't mean to put you on the spot. I got
Yeah,
that.
you
I got
did
that. I got that. You son of a bitch. Look. My point is this.
I want to say there's about 12,000.
My point is this: is that's stories like I just said of situations that I had an idea, and at that time I was operating under the umbrella that I was just a citizen of Texas, right? Till Tmpa, I don't want to say jump on board, but they got involved later on because Chris Patty reached out to our executive team. But every single bill has a story just like that, where it's a Texan or a citizen or a cop or a fireman has an idea of like, man, we love Texas. Texas is the best country in the world. But let's make it better. Let's make it better for our kids. Let's make it better for us, for you, for me, and for everybody around us. And so that's what I find so fascinating about the session and all the bills filed. Now, I'm not saying that some groups or some state elected officials don't do things for personal reasons.
Right.
Those happen, right?
They do.
But for the most part, we've got a good group of legislators coming in, and it's going to be a different group. There was a lot of politic changing and moving and maneuvering around last election.
I think last I counted, we're looking at about 32 new House reps.
Which is significant.
It is, considering there's only 150.
Well, and it's almost like, because there's so many I mean, if you watch session, you need to, if you haven't already, but there's certain rules in place of what you can and can't do. And so the first couple of weeks of sessions, almost like, well, and Bryan, you're going to be experiencing this, is watching it. They rule of order, and they have to basically, there's a training part, right? During, because it's not like you go there, you get trained up, and then now you're a state rep. They're a state rep right now. And so when they have to go to session, and there's like training wheels. And so then you watch them kind of fly, and they start spreading their wings, and now we're good to go. So anyway, it's just an interesting time, and man, I've got so much praise for you guys because what you guys are doing, number one, it's not highlighted enough because sometimes we just can't. You guys are kind of like the secret service of Tmpa because some of the shit that you guys do is behind closed doors that nobody really needs to know about or should know about.
Two things on that. One, where change really happens is not in the committee rooms. Where change really happens is not on the House floor, on the Senate floor. Where change happens is when we have a good relationship with those members down there.
Yep.
And when we see a bad piece of legislation that's filed, and I'll give you a great example of this. Love the guy to death. Ben Bumgardner, I sing his praises everywhere I go. Reason being,
it's times between him and Springer.
yeah. Reason being is there was a really, really bad piece of legislation. And I forget what it was, but it had to do with officer rights. And I walked into his office, and Ben Bumgardner, out of 150 state reps, you walk into any state rep's office, you talk to their scheduler first, and then maybe their ledge director, then maybe their chief of staff, and you get it lucky on a day, maybe you get to run into the state rep. You walk into Ben Bumgardner's office, he's got his desk right there. His philosophy is, I'm elected by the people. They walk in here to see me. They need to see me. So he doesn't hide out in the back office. I'm not saying that those, because they stay busy and they got to be able to designate their time, but I always respected that about him. But anyway, so I'm in there, and this bad piece of legislation, and he's getting pressure from some of the other freshmen during that time period to support this piece of legislation. And he asked me about it, and I looked at it and I said, man, that's shit.
I think it had to do with officers providing statements after critical incidences with being recorded.
I can't remember. There were so many bills. But I do distinctly remember having to do with officer rights and due process. And so, anyways, he No, I take that back. That was on the standalone. I remember which bill it was. It was on the standalone bill to do away with due process on SOA hearings for F5 discharges. So that eventually got passed out of Senate Bill 1445, but there was a standalone bill. And so he's getting pressure to support this bill, and he's like, hey, tell me about this. What do you think? And I said, we're opposed to it. He says, why? And I said, because it's a shit bill. He said, well, what makes it that way? And so I explained to him, I told him just a few stories of our members who maybe got on the bad side of their chief or the bad side of their sheriff, and their chief or sheriff retaliated against him, gave him a bad F5. And
that happens? I didn't. It was hard.
So his response.
Shout out Texas City.
Yeah. His response on that was, oh, fuck that. Rips the bill up and says, I'm against it. Having that kind of relationship with those folks is what makes change down there.
Yeah. No, great point. Great point. Man, is there anything else that you guys want to cover or go over? No? Okay.
I don't think so.
Well,
so just one thing. Want to give props to my boy here. He's going through his FTO program right now.
I was going to ask.
And he gets frustrated. He gets frustrated with me because we'll go to the Capitol and I'm like, all right, take me to this office. And that building can be a little cumbersome to get around if you're not too familiar with it.
Oh, so it's kind of like the where are we at?
Oh yeah,
in the cop car deal.
It is.
Are you doing good?
And he throws that out when you, just like we did as FTOs out on the street, when they don't even see it coming.
Well, those that have never walked the hallways of the Capitol, every single hallway in the back, they're literally painted. The walls are painted the same. The wood is the same stain color. You can get lost pretty easy. It is very much a maze. So
absolutely.
Well, I'm glad you're passing, Brian.
I don't want to bust him out, but the other day he had me going up a flight of stairs, across, down a flight of stairs, and we ended up right back where we started.
Yeah. Well,
the stuff for whatever reason, I don't think I hadn't had my second cup of coffee yet. I don't know, knowing full well that where we were going, that we go downstairs first, and for whatever reason, I was like, let's take that staircase.
Well, again, I greatly appreciate it. Majority of everybody else that is involved with the session, appreciate you guys. So looking forward to this session and looking forward to you getting another, or I guess 1 year under your belt. This will be your third.
This will be my third session.
So it'll be good times. I hope you study, because there is a couple questions that we typically do on Blue Grit Podcast. We were unable to do it last session or last podcast because our guest was not a cop. But are you ready?
Sure.
What is your favorite drink of choice? I'm sorry. Let's start off with this. Your favorite cop car, your favorite line from a cop movie, or your favorite cop movie, and your favorite drink of choice?
Probably favorite cop movie for me would be, and that obviously will show my age, would be Hill Street Blues.
That's a good one.
Absolutely on that.
Favorite cop car?
Crown Vic.
Because
that is the
workhorse,
predominant thing that I drove, and especially because I'm old enough. The very first Crown Vic I drove was my sheriff, Jimmy Don Boydston back then. it was passed on from him. It was the sheriff's car. So whenever he had it, got it brand new, and that's the old kind of box style.
It's probably like
car.
a civilian model, probably.
Well, he never had to test that. Like, he drove from his house to the office, which was, I think, only like 4 or 5 miles a day on that. So by the time it got to me, like, it had never been like broke in. Like, to get the accelerator to go fast, like, you would get a cramp in your foot and your leg because you're pressing that gas pedal down so hard, and I would have to pull the steering wheel to get that counter. And like, it just wasn't broke in. So that was my first one. So yeah, absolutely. And that was,
the first time I got the Crown Vic and it had cruise control. Remember the old style, like, steering wheels, they were slick. They just had the big old Ford oval. I was like, man, they've upgraded. And so I for the longest thought, I was so proud that the department that I came from had upgraded to like the premium police package. And then later I was told that that's standard now. Like, we're up at age that we have electric windows and everything else. What's your favorite drink of choice?
Well, really, it's Dr. Pepper. But as far as adult beverage, because I'm not a huge drinker. I might drink a beer once or twice a month, but and that's usually beer. So
yeah,
I'm not. I mean, I got introduced to the old fashioned, thing, and it's not bad. It's not bad, but
yeah.
I'm just not. Because if I'm at the house and I've had 2 beers, then it's time for bed. So, as far as beer goes, would be usually it's a Blue Moon or a Shock Top, or
those are so good.
But I'll also drink a Lone Star.
Yeah.
So I'm not a
Lone Star will put you on your ass if you ain't careful.
So
Do you not have tap water out of the sink?
we do.
Oh, okay.
We do.
It's about the same.
It's not.
Well,
It's not.
for Buffalo Trace and Angel Envy guys, that I would say the same thing. I stay away from those. I'm a beer guy. Angel's Envy and Buffalo Trace does not do good things to Colorado.
I've heard you got some experience with Angels Envy.
All right. Well, that's it from our Ledge team. If you guys need to reach out to our Ledge guys, I'll put the email there in the description. Thank you so much for tuning in. You guys stay safe, stay cool. We are experiencing, this is the hottest part of Texas. We are experiencing that. They're down in Wimberley. Football season's kicked off. Favorite time of the year across the state. Texas high school football kicks off in a couple weeks, and super exciting times. So anyway, that's it from us. Stay safe, stay cool. God bless you, and as always, may God bless Texas. We're out.